Hi, you're listening to Phil DeBella, and this is FlashCast by PDB. And today I'm going to tackle something that's come in from a listener friend of ours, which we'll call Susan. So Susan from Sydney has sent in a very, very descriptive email, but the basis of it is, how do you get rid of toxic people in your life? And I think that Susan's not alone. I've definitely had to get rid of toxic people in my life. And I've never tackled a flashcast like this. So, going to do it over the next 10 minutes or so. And I'm going to start with identifying what toxic behaviour is. So I've just done some research on this to get a qualified version on it. And very simply, and it's when I type in what is considered toxic behaviour, what's come back is toxic behaviour is common for people that create drama in their lives or are surrounded by it. They try to manipulate or control others. They are needy and it's all about them all the time. They use others to meet their needs. And they're extremely critical of themselves and others. So, pretty in-depth. Common for people with toxic behaviour too. Create drama in their lives or be surrounded by it. Try to manipulate or control others. Be needy, where it's all about them. And they use others to meet their needs, which is a sign of narcissistic behaviour. And they're extremely critical of themselves, but definitely of others. So, Susan, that is identifying what toxic behaviour is, and that's a summary that's come from a few different people's interpretations of toxic behaviour. So what I want to do is talk about, what are some signs that show that a person is toxic? So, what are the signs of this? How do we identify it? So, let's talk about how to identify it, and then finally eliminating them. So what are some ways that we can go about eliminating? So let's kick off with, what are the signs of a toxic person? Well, a toxic person leaves you feeling emotionally exhausted. Let's be honest, right? So someone that's toxic is leaving you emotionally exhausted. They're draining you, and they're draining you for a lot of reasons because of the definition that we talked about before, where it's all about them. It's never about you. They're taking, they're not giving, all this sort of stuff. But if you feel like you're being left, emotionally exhausted after encountering a certain person, then that's one sign to know that this person is toxic. Another way is that they try and intimidate you to get their own way. So we see this where they put you down to put themselves up, or they do it to other people. They're putting other people down to put themselves up, but they're intimidating you. So if you feel intimidated so that they can get their own way, then this is another sign of toxic behavior. They control you through guilt tripping. So, very common, they're making you feel guilty all the time so that they can get what they want, which is another sign of a person being toxic. They are jealous. They don't look at things and say, right, well, I want that. I'm going to go and work for it. I'm going to plan for it. They're jealous about it. They don't want the best for you. They actually want the worst for you because they're jealous of something that you've achieved or something that you've purchased or something that you've done. They're not, happy for you and using that as inspiration for themselves, but rather they're putting you down and feeling this feeling of jealousy, this feeling of hate, this feeling of negativity towards you because you've achieved something or gained something that they have not. They constantly see themselves as a victim is another way to see what person is toxic for you, is that they're constantly seeing themselves as a victim because obviously, like all of these traits, it has a negative impact on you and your well-being. They give compliments, but they're loaded. And what I mean by that, they give loaded compliments. The compliment is in search of, a compliment back for themselves, or it's actually coming from a place that segues for them to talk about themselves. So a loaded compliment is actually trying to come across as positive, but it's quite narcissistic. There's an ulterior motive. The intention is not about putting yourself up, but the intention is more about themselves. And the other one is that a toxic person is always defensive. You can't raise an issue with them. You can't raise a topic of discussion with them without them getting defensive. Everything's coming from a place of needing to defend themselves. So some of the signs of a toxic person that I've encountered from firsthand experience, but also after talking to some other people and getting their thoughts on this, is that a toxic person makes you feel emotionally exhausted. They try to intimidate you. They try and control you by guilt tripping. They're very jealous. They constantly see themselves as a victim. They give loaded compliments searching for something in return, and they're very defensive. So you might know people that, that show multiple traits of this, highly toxic person. You might have people that might show one or two of these, maybe on the watch list. But if you struggle to understand what a toxic person is, then some of these traits and how they make you feel might help you identify that. And if you find that you do have toxic people in your life, and like I said, I've had to get rid of a few people out of my life, and I've used a method called affectionate detachment, and it's quite common in the Swamis, and I was lucky enough to do an Indian Swami course many years ago. And I learned the art of affectionate detachment, how to identify a person as toxic and then detach from them in an affectionate way. And that often means detaching before you get the really bad feelings or it comes to a crossroad where you have no other, way to go. Now, since then, I've learned obviously even more. And after, again, speaking to other people, when I've asked several people the question of how did you actually get rid of people that are toxic from your life? It's come back with a few different tips. So I've put together a collation of some of what people have said. And first one is identify what the toxicity is. So before you can get rid of something or get rid of someone, you've actually got to understand how it's harming you. What is it? What is that person actually doing that's harming you? So you need to identify what the toxicity is so that you can really then deal with it. So before you can actually deal with it, you need to identify it, right? Which is obviously very important and came up as a comment from everyone that I spoke to, that you can't actually get rid of something without identifying it, which makes sense. The next one is you need to be firm. You need to be strong. Now, you need to be firm with yourself and you need to be firm with the person that you're dealing with. It has to be met with full-on, what we call courageous conversation. You've got to be firm because the moment you don't attract it firmly, then you're leaving yourself open to not sorting the problem. You need to set boundaries. And once you set boundaries, you need to stick to them. And we've all been, around the people that have this ability to apologize or they have this ability to worm their way back into your life. It's happened to me. But we need to set boundaries. And this comes from personal experience. You need to set boundaries. And that goes obviously with being firm and that goes with identifying. And you'll start to see how all of these interact with each other. But set those boundaries. Right? If you say that you're not going to communicate with the person for a week or you're not going to, talk about business with this person when you're in their company, then you need to make sure that you stick to it. Set the boundary and stick to it. Now, 4 is going to sound harsh, but needs to happen because if you've identified this person as toxic, then number 4 is don't be too nice. You can't be too nice, right? It doesn't mean that you need to be cruel, but you don't need to be too nice because sometimes when we try and go about things in a nice way, then the message actually doesn't hit home. You need to be firm, but you need to make sure that you are not too nice because if you're not, it's not going to work. Number 5 is you need to realize that you can't save the world. It's, I've had people in my life that I thought, but I got to help this person. I felt this ongoing obligation that I needed to be there, that I could help them. It came from a place of guilt. And I've realized, especially after 2019 and some of 2020, it's not my job to save them. It's actually not my job to save the world, right? It's my job to have a vision. It's my job to have a positive impact, to build a legacy, to be supportive, to give back. But it's not my job to save people. And I've been put in position before, which I now can identify they were toxic, is that I had this guilt that I thought I had to save the world. And the moment that I realized that I didn't have to save them, it wasn't my responsibility to save them, then I could deal with these toxic people. So please understand that it's not your job to save the world. It's not your job, and don't let them make you feel like it is, to be their savior. Number 6 is when it's done, it's done. So when you make that decision to cut the ties, when you're going to affectionately detach, you detach, and there's no going back. And I've done this on many occasions. I don't have any hate. I've dealt with it, but I certainly don't go back. So that's the way I've dealt with toxic people. I hope this helps you. I know there would not be many listeners that never had to deal with a toxic person. So please forge ahead. I hope this helps you. It's not a great topic to cover, but Sue from Sydney, I really appreciate the questions because it's helped me go back and reflect and speak to people. Till next time, you've been listening to Phil DeBella, and this is FlashCast by PDB.